baby, listen to me speak, yeah. No matter what, just let it go.
Pop, persuadable. What's going on, boo-boos? We are going to do a video on erectile dysfunction. All right, boo-boos. So we're going to do a video on Lucino or Lucino. Depends on, actually, Italians, I believe, say Lucino. And more Spanish descent would say Luchino. Either way, I don't know. I just YouTubed that right now. In this video, I'm going to talk about how the devs could try to balance his character out a little bit more and buff him. I do think that Lucino is undervalued. I think there's a lot of issues. And I'm also going to compare my suggestions with either other characters or precedents with what the devs have historically buffed or nerfed characters using that similar rationale. So, and that's me dancing because that was an awesome fucking clip. All right, so here we go. So let's talk about Lucino right away in the beginning. The fact that your skill does no damage in early game, which is really weird because we understand that early game is supposed to be very important. And the idea is that you're supposed to be a really good against anti-rescue and with his ability. So that means that in the beginning of the game, you're really stuck with one of two strategies. Using your jump to really catch up to a survivor, which requires an incredible amount of knowledge about all spawn points and spawn differentials on all maps, right? Or you can try to use your jump ability where you jump over a pallet and you're able to turn around and hit them real quickly. It requires an incredible amount of skill, and if you don't use it correctly, you're just going to buy a lot of kiting time for that survivor. So his early game really is not that strong in high tiers unless you can catch a survivor off guard. And a lot of Luchinos, they don't build up north. So you'll see a lot of that east and south build. And because of that, it's generally one of the things that I would recommend is increasing that damage in the beginning of the game for Lucino. You have characters like Feaster that can already do that. Ripper does damage with his skill. Clown does damage with his skill. That they all do half damage with their skills, including Bloody Queen as well. And although there are some hunters that do not do half damage but 25% damage in the beginning of the game, such as Gamekeeper and Mad Eyes and Bonbon, it's also because you can spam their abilities a lot faster. So the first recommendation I would make is actually allow an evil reptilian to use his skill in the beginning of the game to do half damage. It takes an incredible amount of skill in order to be able to land that. Also remember that evil reptilian in the beginning of the game, he drops down a lot slower when compared to the end of the game. So this idea that by allowing him to do half damage is overpowered, it's not really a thing because he drops down a lot slower. He doesn't increase that speed until he maximizes his persona out. Now with this clip, I'm just showing a big brain moment because I needed more time to articulate my thoughts as to why I do believe evil reptilian should be able to do half damage, and that's just me being an idiot. Hey, it was a good move. Another recommendation that I would make for Lucino is actually the ability to increase sensitivity of the camera in the air. If you think about it, right, Clown has sensitivity options, Forward, he has sensitivity options. I mean, even Feaster's Tentacle has an option to do that whole auto hit thing. So with Lucino, one of the biggest issues playing him on a mobile device is that it's really difficult to turn while in the air. You do get better as you practice, but you will never have the same exact sort of controls and precision as what a lizard does on PC. As an example, I have to put my finger on the left upper portion side of the phone in order for him to turn in the air. I don't use it on the left corner, bottom corner like you do to move Lizard Man. So where your thumb is placed is different. And what I'm trying to practice here is being able to turn back around towards that pallet right there. And I'm trying to do 3 jumps with max presence in order to go back towards the pallet so I can mind game. And although you can get better with practice, I by all means am not a Lizard pro, it's much more difficult. And that's why It's actually more difficult on an iPad because you have to drag your finger a lot faster. So I wish that they would increase sensitivity to make that easier. Now, another issue that I have with Evil Reptilian is his hitbox. Now, his hitbox is worse than Geisha's, hands down, and it would make sense given his ability. But watch this, right? I made a community post on YouTube talking about this, how that actually missed, and it registered against a rocket chair, which I have no idea how. He has probably the worst hitbox in the entire game. And again, I'm not saying he should have the best hitbox in the game. I mean, he is an anti-rescue sort of character. All right, but this should not have missed by any means whatsoever. His hitbox is really, really bad, and I think this may even be a glitch where you're going to see it here. This has happened twice now, where once somebody goes to rescue, their body see how their body changes and repositions? Well, their body changes and repositions, and then somehow, even if I miss the hit, that should not register against a rocket chair. And this is my huge issue with him. Now, another complaint that some people have, I don't really have this complaint, is that the damage radius should be increased. I don't think they really need to change that yet. I think that if they do half damage in the beginning of the game, I think he'll be all right, as well as increased sensitivity to give better controls to match what you can do on the PC. And again, they did this with Clown, so there is precedence there for that recommendation. The next position is a little difficult to explain because I'm not against it, but I'm against it how he is now. But if you change him how I think he needs to be changed, it works. I know. You see that little energy bar down there? It depletes as you use his skills. Now, the problem is that early game, this really hurts him because you can't jump too much. So he has a cap to how much he can jump for a skill that does literally no damage and is relatively easily countered by some of the best players in the game. And really, I think that this energy meter would make sense if he could do damage in the beginning of the game. And in reality, he cannot, so it doesn't make much sense to me currently. Now, again, this is a fast-paced game, so to have energy constraints in the beginning of the match, I mean, look at how much that takes just doing it once. And it makes no sense because he can't do any damage in the beginning of the game. So I do think that if they incorporate some of the additional changes, then it makes sense. But under what it currently is right now, I don't think it does. And you can see me using that ability where I tried to jump over the pallet and swing. I just didn't do a good enough job, but that is a strategy. We were talking about that in the beginning of the game. Now, if it's okay with everybody, I'd like to finish this video out with just a really good match that I had and continue talking about Luchino. So I'm not going to really have any more fancy editing in the video. A lot of these matches were over the course of probably 100 to 200 matches, just really playing him over and over and over and just getting a good feel on him. I do know some people say that they have an issue with the obstacles in the game, such as when you jump and you run into objects or jump into objects and then you crash down. What I can tell you as a player is that over time I got better at understanding where I could jump and where I could not. And although sometimes it does fuck me a little bit, I don't think it's too bad when you practice and get a little bit better. I do think obviously some maps you can genuinely really not play him. White Sand Asylum or whatever that map's stupid ass name is pretty bad. Golden Cave is even worse in my opinion on the second and third floor of using him. So there are definitely limitations to using him. However, I think that what we really need to do is also do a slow integration. You guys know that I'm not really always in favor of buffing a character too much at once. We saw this with Cowboy. Doesn't really work out well. Historically, the devs usually do take their time. They have done that with pretty much virtually every character over the course of many additional tiny adjustments. And I think some of these will work very well with Lizard Man. I am going to stick with my opinion that out of all of the hunters, I think he requires possibly the most amount of skill. Because he doesn't really have too much of an anti-tight kite in the beginning of the game, to a degree, it's kind of like what a photographer is limited to. However, he doesn't have the ability to slow down the game like photographer does. That's why he needs better anti-tight kiting, which would be provided if we provided him half damage with his skill early game. and not 25% damage or 0% damage, because you can't really spam the ability as much. And again, if you allow damage to be done with his jumping ability early game, then I'm totally in favor of this little energy meter that we have. But I do feel like his anti-kite, or tight kiting, geez, that's hard to say, it is really bad. I mean, even a geisha early game, I know she's difficult, but she can still go through a wall when used correctly, especially on PC, because the angles are easier. But we know a lizard man, he has to go over the wall, and that also requires a little bit of reaction time from survivors. So I think that his early game is really what's unremarkable, and you put some damage in there, and he's relatively all right. I like playing Lizard Man. I've played 100, 200 matches with him. Yeah, I've played with him before in the past. I think the devs should consider some of these adjustments to make him a little bit better for other players to use him. I think balance is a very important aspect, and although a lot of you know that hunters generally win more, that doesn't mean that all hunters are created equal. And that's something that's very important to mention. Just because hunters, at least they used to win a hell of a lot more for 5, 6 seasons now. I don't know if something's changed in the past 3 months, but that doesn't mean that all hunters are created equal, and it's paramount that we try to get this down. In conclusion, I think that if we add half damage in the beginning of the game, change up his hitbox a tiny bit, make it a little bit better, he'll be more dangerous. And of course, I would want it to be more of a slow integration. I don't want too much too fast. We saw that with Cowboy, and that's been a disaster. But I'd like to hear your recommendations on Luchino. Like I said, I've played him a lot in the past. Just really picked him up recently just to tinker around with them out of fan requests. And yeah, so this is me providing solutions to the problem. Tell me what you think. Bye now.